What an honor it is to be here in Dubai with great people of the UAE. We're going to go off on an interesting adventure this morning, and we're going to look at different ways of thinking about the future. Now I'm going to start by playing a short video clip from the Jetsons. This is a cartoon show that happened in 1962. Let me just start with this, and then I'll explain a little bit more about it.
Meet George Jetson. His boy Elroy. Daughter Judy. Jane, his wife.
All right, this is just a short clip. Now, the cartoon The Jetsons was made in 1962. And I was approached by a group, and it was intended to portray life in 2062. And that was the part that I didn't realize. So what's life going to be like 100 years in the future? So I was approached by Arconic, a company that wanted to actually remake this short intro to the Jetsons and visualize what life would be like in 2062 based on what we understand today. So it was an effort that was put together by Justin Lin, a Hollywood filmmaker, and he contacted four of us and we went through this brainstorming session, and so I was involved with Kevin Kelly and Adrian Hahn and Anne-Lisa Cager. So I'd like to show you what we came up with as our vision today of what life in 2062 would be as portrayed through the eyes of the Jetsons.
Meet George Jetson. His boy Elroy. Daughter Judy. Jane, his wife.
So this is going to be used in a commercial for the Arconic Corporation, a division of Alcoa, and they wanted to use it as to kind of portray life in the future. I thought it was such an interesting exercise because we have a hard time visualizing the future. We tend to be a very backward-looking society. We're a backward-looking society because it's just human nature. See, we've all personally experienced the past. As we look around us, we see evidence of the past all around us. All information we come into contact with is essentially history. So the past is very knowable, and yet we're going to be spending the rest of our lives in the future. So it's almost as if we're walking backwards into the future. My job as a futurist is to help turn people around, to give them some idea of what the future might hold. So how does the future get created? Well, the future gets created in the minds of everybody around us. We all participate in creating the future. Certainly some of us have more influence than others. But people make decisions today based on their understanding of what the future holds. So I use this phrase a lot, the future creates the present. Now this is just the opposite of what most people think. Most people think that what we're doing today is going to create the future, but from a little different perspective, it's these visions of the future that we have in our heads determine our actions today. So if we change somebody's vision of the future, we change the way they make decisions today. So this is my promise to you. I promise to you, in the next few minutes, I'm going to change your vision of the future, and as a result, you're going to walk out of here making different decisions. So I often get asked if I have a crystal ball, and yes, I do have a crystal ball. Sitting around at home, my wife asked me to take it to the office because it was just collecting dust. So I put it in my car. I was driving to the office. I was no more than 4 or 5 minutes down the road, and I looked over and I saw that my crystal ball had actually started a fire on the seat next to me. This is a giant lens. A crystal ball is a giant lens, and sun shining in, and so I should have known better. So luckily I was able to put out the fire and it didn't cause any serious damage, but then I had this massive revelation, which obviously must have come from my crystal ball. And the revelation was that the newspaper headlines the next day were going to say, "Futurist killed by his own crystal ball," and he didn't see it coming. So that's my one disclaimer. When it comes to futurism, I don't see everything. Larry Page, the founder of Google, says that the main reasons companies fail is because they miss the future. I happen to agree with that. Now, when we think about what's coming in the future, there's a difference between catalytic innovation and disruptive innovation. Disruptive innovation disrupts existing industry and constantly forces us to do more with less. Catalytic innovation are those technologies coming along that create entirely new operations, new industries. So in the past, catalytic innovations were things like electricity, automobiles, airplanes, telephones, photographs. All of these came along and they created entire new industries, multi-billion, multi-trillion dollar industries. But here's the thing, all industries are essentially a bell curve. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. All industries will eventually end. But most industries today, it's important to realize, most industries today happen to be in the second half of the bell curve. The most profitable industries we have around today, they're constantly having to do more with less. Now, over the next 1,000 years, virtually every industry we have today will have been replaced several times. So we need to get used to the idea that industries will eventually go away. If we look at the idea of peak steel is there's some projections out there that say we'll reach the peak demand for steel in the world somewhere around 2024. That's when we develop synthetic materials that are reduce the overall demand for steel. But the peak employment in the steel industry was in the 1980s. Around the world, we had 3 times as many people working in the steel industry in the 1980s as we do today, but we're still producing far more steel today. So the peak employment tends to be a lead indicator as to when the overall demands for that goods or service will start to decline. Now, one of the things I get quoted on time and again in news media around the world is 4 years ago I made the prediction in Istanbul at a TEDx conference that by 2030 over 2 billion jobs are going to disappear. Now, when I made that statement, it was not intended to be a doom or gloom statement. It was intended to be a wake-up call, because we're going to have to create jobs at a faster rate than ever before. We're not going to see 2 billion people unemployed in the world. We're just going to have to create new jobs at a faster rate. This is what I refer to as the level problem. Now, a lot of us have this tool in our garage at home, in our toolbox. We use it to straighten pictures on the wall. We use it for doing construction work in our house. But once we download a level app, we no longer have the need for that tool. That means we don't have to have as many aluminum frames built. We don't have to have as many glass bulbs. We don't have to have as many people doing the assembly work, the shipping, the receiving. Every time we download a mobile app, we eliminate a piece of a job. It's a very tiny piece of a job, but when we're downloading billions upon billions of mobile apps, we're eliminating lots of jobs. Oxford researchers, last year, they went and looked at 700 different occupations, and they concluded that over the next 20 years that we'll be able to, machines are going to take over 47% of today's jobs. Coincidentally, that works out to 2 billion people. So thank you, Oxford. It's not just the low-level jobs. It's also middle management jobs and even higher-level jobs. See, in a taxi company, taxi companies have people in charge of the drivers, in charge of cars, in charge of logistics and maintenance and repair work. All of that gets automated out of existence with software. So it's not just the low-level jobs. But in our quest to create future jobs, all existing industries will be disrupted. There are no safe industries out there. Look for the entrepreneurs, look for the startup people to try to disrupt all the existing industries. If we look at the financial technology space, there's over 8,000 startups trying to get into the financial technology space. This is referred to as fintech. They were funded by $12.5 billion in money last year. I like to think of this as the little piranhas tend to take bites out of the giant whale, death by 1,000 paper cuts. So one of the industries that's going through this disruption is the automobile industry and driverless cars and how they're going to start affecting everything. I wrote a column recently on 128 things that will disappear in the driverless car era. And I'd like to step you through some of them because it starts to become very revealing on how big of impact just driverless technologies are going to have on the world.
Please go ahead.
So this is Mercedes' vision of driverless technologies. And over time, we're going to see all the flaws in this in our thinking today as all of this evolves. But if you can imagine 10 years from now, stepping out in front of your house, you punch in to your smartphone, I want to go to work, I want to go shopping, I want to go to school. A driverless car comes and picks you up, it takes you to where you want to go, and from there it picks somebody else up and takes them to where they want to go. This becomes a form of on-demand transportation. It transitions us from a just-in-case mindset, I have a car in my garage just in case I need to go somewhere, to a just-in-time mindset. I can summon a vehicle at any time that I need it. That little transition will have profound effects. Suddenly, we're going to start seeing, as we don't need to own our own cars, we're going to start seeing the loss of taxi drivers, Uber and Lyft drivers, delivery jobs. Millions and millions of driving jobs around the world start to disappear. Now, this doesn't happen instantly. This will taper down over the next 2 to 3 decades. So taxi drivers, those jobs are gone. Valet jobs, those are gone. Rental car industry, the rental car industry is gone. Auto insurance industry is going to start to decline. Credit managers, loan underwriters, car licensing and registration, all of that goes away. So the dealerships are gone. Cleaning up after car accidents, we won't have accidents hardly at all. Even the crash test dummies are going to go away. Volvo has announced that by 2020, they're going to start producing death-proof cars. Now, as we inch our way into the driverless car era, we're going to start implementing lots of collision avoidance systems. And whether or not Volvo actually makes it to a death-proof car by 2020, I still applaud them for their effort. I hope they do. Lots of other retail stores go away. Gas stations, car washes, oil change business, tire shops, brake shops, alignment shops, all of these start going away. Roughly 10% of all of our retail today is associated with cars. So gas stations, those go away. Service centers go away. Now we'll still need these things, but it becomes a B2B operation as individuals or companies own large fleets of vehicles, and so rather than us owning our own cars, we'll have individuals that we can summon vehicles. So somebody will, maybe a rental car company today will evolve into that. Maybe it's Uber or Lyft, maybe it's Ford or General Motors. One of those will own millions of cars with fleets in every major city. Emission testing go away. Parking lots are going to go away. Huge amounts of real estate is dedicated to parking. Parking garages, valet services, parking meters, charging stations. All of these big structures start to go away. Even handicap parking goes away. Roadside assistance, body shops, tow trucks, glass repair, auto parts stores, all of these things start going away. The tow trucks, traffic jams, I can't wait for them to go away. So as a result of this, our thinking is going to start transitioning. My thinking is that people own large fleets of vehicles. Most of the rides today just have one person in the car. So driverless cars, I think majority of them are just going to be one-person vehicles. As we redesign our major institutions, our major buildings, we're going to put queuing stations in front of them. We get rid of the parking lots, and so we have driverless cars queued up in front of every building. Electric cars will dominate. As battery life gets better on electric cars, then the sound of a city will begin to change. It becomes much quieter. And somewhere between 2030 and 2035, we're going to start seeing the first highways that are designated as driverless only. So we can only pull our cars onto those roads if we can can switch them into a driverless mode. But I want to give you one quick example of how profound of an effect this will have on other aspects of society. So if we look at rethinking airports in the future, in the driverless era, suddenly there's no parking lots at airports. That means no parking revenues. There's no rental car agencies, no buses, no taxis, no valet services, no chauffeurs and limos. All of this transitions out of the airport, and airports become a radically different type of facility as a result of that. And so we're going to have our thinking evolve dramatically over the coming years, but just this alone, when we talk about airports, I mean, this is going to have a profound effect on hospitals, on schools, on just virtually every aspect of our lives. And then the CEO of Airbus announced that by 2020, they will have drone taxis ready to go. I don't think that they will catch on until probably much later, maybe 2030. But drone taxis are going to mean that we need to put some sort of landing pads in lots of places around our city. So currently there's 30 car companies involved in the driverless arena. That number is going up almost on a weekly basis. But the key thing is it eliminates the human variable. It means that we don't have to worry about people texting while they're driving, or drinking while they're driving, or putting makeup on, or shaving. All of those things transition, and it becomes a much safer world. So there's lots of positives. Eliminates all the accidents, millions and millions of accidents around the world. 20 million deaths every year due to car accidents. And this is what an intersection will look like in the driverless car era. It's kind of mesmerizing. It's a little bit like India looks today, but as my favorite physicist, Max Planck, likes to say, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Every year, my wife and I go to the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, and every year there's thousands of televisions on display. They're a little bit bigger, a little bit brighter, better battery life, more downloadable apps. So if you compare televisions from one year to the next, you won't see much of a difference. But if you compare TVs today to 15 years ago, you see a dramatic difference. So I use this phrase quite a bit, that the iterators are more valuable than the innovators. The iterators are the engineers, so the ones that are constantly improving products and making them much more usable. They often don't get the credit that they deserve. See, once we have a new product that's totally innovative, something that's radically new and different, that's going to change everything in the world, we have to work our way through the crappy stages before we get to something that's really good. We're moving our way into a digital product world, and as things become more digital, we start going up this exponential growth curve. So as an example, the solar power industry right now only accounts for 2% of the power in the world, but it's been shown to be reliably doubling every 2 years. Now, if that continues to reliably double every 2 years, it becomes very deceptive because the growth takes off much quicker than you think. And so over 12 years then, solar would become the dominant form of power in the world. We'll see if that continues to go that way. We're transitioning from physical cars to digital cars, from physical homes to smart homes, from physical cities to smart cities. As a result, innovation's being parsed into far smaller pieces, and each of us can participate in little ways to make innovation happen. At the same time, communication is being parsed into far smaller pieces. So when I was a kid, I used to write long letters to my friends. Now, communications is as small as one single emoticon, and it says more than my entire letter did when I was a kid. And we're entering a world defined by scalability. Let me give you some data points here. We reached the first billion bicycles in the world in 2003, roughly 200 years of the history of the bicycle. About 120 years it took to reach the first billion cars in the world. That's around 2010. McDonald's took them 23 years to reach the first billion hamburgers sold. Facebook took 8.5 years to reach the first billion users. Uber, 5.5 years to reach the first billion rides. And Uber has a competitor, Didi Kuwati, in China that took them a little under 11 months to reach the first billion rides in China. But this guy actually reached the first billion views on YouTube in 157 days in 2012. But he didn't set the record. Actually, Adele did in 87 days the first billion views on Facebook. So on one hand, we're eliminating a lot of jobs. On the other hand, we're freeing up human capital. So just because our jobs disappear doesn't mean we've run out of work to do in the world. Now that's kind of ludicrous to think. Have you looked around? There's plenty of work to do. But there is lots of opportunity for new things, and we're still not going to have jobs for all the work that needs to be done. So I came up with the 3 laws of exponential capabilities. And this talks about how all of this automation gives us additional capabilities. The first law is that with automation, every exponential decrease in effort creates an equal and opposite exponential increase in capabilities. So as an example, in 1850, the average transportation speed was 6 kilometers an hour, and over a lifetime we would travel 110,000 kilometers. 1900, it doubled to 12 kilometers an hour, and then 1950, we tripled to 36 kilometers an hour. Now in 2000, because so many people were flying, we reached 110 kilometers an hour, and if we follow that trend line, by 2050, we should be averaging 335, 340 kilometers an hour, and over a lifetime, we will travel 11.1 million kilometers. That's a 100-fold increase in just 200 years. So how are we going to get there? Law number 2, as we raise the bar for our expectations, we reset the norm for our expectations. And as today's significant accomplishments become more common, mega accomplishments will take their place. So we can now think faster, know faster, and do faster than ever before in history. So where is our next generation jobs going to come from? And keep in mind, this is going to be very pervasive in the back of everybody as they in common life. The answer is our jobs are going to come from future industries. So I like to think about the internet as creating a platform for huge amounts of new opportunities. And then a few years ago, we had smartphones came along and created an entire new platform for new opportunities. Right now, I see 8 different platforms, each with internet-sized opportunities, creating room for millions and millions of new jobs, touching literally every person on the face of the earth. So these are the 8 platforms here. I'll touch on these real quickly. The trillion sensor movement. 3 years ago, Janice Burzek actually held an event called the Trillion Sensor Summit, and they put together a map as to how long it would take to reach the first trillion sensors in the world. It's somewhere between 2022 and 2024. And that by 2036, we're going to reach 100 trillion sensors in the world. Now, what this means is that the sensors are going to become much tinier, much easier to mass produce, very inexpensive, very ubiquitous. And we're going to embed sensors in everything. We'll embed it in paints that we paint our walls with, or we'll embed it in our clothing, we'll put it on the sides of our walls and the sides of our cars. We'll have sensors everywhere. This looks like a very simple skin patch. It's actually a very sophisticated communication device. The first smartphone that came out had 5 sensors in it. Today, the average smartphone has between 19 and 20 sensors in it. The Internet of Things, devices talking to devices, talking trash about other devices, spreading rumors and lies about other devices. These are lots of gadgets, lots of devices, talking to everything in the world around us. There's a category of Internet of Things objects called Enchanted Devices, and I'll mention these real quickly. The Amazon trash can actually will scan a device as it's being thrown away. All right, with that, I thank you very much for letting me speak here today, and I wish you the best. Thank you.